In your Sunday forecast, a meeting of the minds. This week, Congressman Paul Ryan is scheduled to meet with members of the Congressional Black Caucus as part of an effort to clean up the mess he made with recent comments. Comments that he says were misinterpreted. Take a listen.
We have got this tailspin of culture in our inner cities in particular of men not working and just generations of men not even thinking about working or learning the value and the culture of work. And so there's a real culture problem here that has to be dealt with.
You know, Mr. Ryan, there is a cultural problem that needs to be dealt with, like moving past dog whistle politics and your rhetoric of makers and takers or a permanent class of government dependents. Hopefully, you'll really listen as the CBC members try to help you understand why your reference to the inner city sounded like a racist coded reference to black people. And while you're at it, perhaps the CBC can also explain why your budget proposal makes any thought of being seen as the new Jack Kemp or a champion of the poor absolutely impossible. Alahe, Perry, and John are back, and we're joined by Angela Glover-Blackwell, founder and CEO of Policy Link, and Congresswoman Gwen Moore, a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, who will be in the meeting this week, and she serves on the Budget Committee with Mr. Ryan. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me with this powerful panel you have.
That's right. We're going to get to the bottom of this, one way or the other. So, Congresswoman, I guess, you know, the obvious question is, what do you expect to get out of this meeting?
Well, I mean, clearly, you know, we don't, the budget, the House version of the budget is already passed, and it's $791 billion, even below sequester levels. And, I mean, it cuts everything from WIC to subsidies for Amtrak, to health care for veterans. It hurts not only the very, very poor, but the middle class as well. It raises taxes on the average American by $2,000 and lowers taxes on the very wealthy by $200,000. So we don't expect him to walk back from that. But he has seemed to be interested in having a conversation about ending poverty. And we certainly agree on that. And so we see this as a tremendous opportunity to talk to a powerful member of Congress, the chairman of the Budget Committee, and potentially the ranking member, chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, about more strategic ways to help the poor with job training opportunities, with economic development activities that are focused and targeted, rather than just simply slashing and burning benefits not only to the poor, but hurting, slowing the growth of our economy.
So I just want to follow up with you on that, because I read something that you wrote where you said, or that you had said, we're happy that Representative Ryan wants to engage in this conversation, and we're not going to let him get away with sort of a sleight of hand on this. We know how to crunch numbers as well. Is that how you're going to try to show him maybe some of the error of his budgeting ways?
Well, you know, for one thing, his budget does not balance arithmetically or morally. You just can't cut benefits to the very, very poor, to those who are unemployed, and say that you're helping the poor. We have the Congressional Black Caucus, you know, we have leadership from Representative Bobby Scott, and Barbara Lee is also on the Budget Committee, Chairman Fudge. We put together a very responsible Congressional Black Caucus budget every year. And our budget not only does not slash and burn benefits to the poor, but it helps grow our economy, it taxes more fairly, and it does reduce the deficit. So we do have a product that we have spent a lot of time putting together as a budget, and so we can't be tricked with some of the accounting tricks that Ryan has.
Some of those numbers.
Exactly. I mean, right. You can't cut and get rid of the Affordable Care Act, for example, and then expect to still count the savings from that in your budget. There are a lot of tricks that he plays, and it's just not going to work with us.
You know, Angela, so Ryan has sort of been trying to remake himself as, you know, this Jack Kemp advocate on poverty, and yet he's sort of saying not many of the right things, but he seems to be trying, and yet the budget and his policies and the talk that we've heard from him time and again, makers and takers and dependents and all of that, really just doesn't seem to jibe with what he says his goal actually is.
That's right. He has a long way to go to establish himself as a person who cares about poverty, cares about people of color in this country. For a person who is intelligent, to admit to ignorance and ineptitude is an amazing opportunity. So I hope that the Congressional Black Caucus will fully take advantage of it and offer him a roadmap to how to be able to show that he's a champion for those who are being left behind. The budget that he's put forward, the rhetoric that he's engaged in, the things he's failed to be a champion for, all paint a very negative picture of where he's really coming from. The Congressional Black Caucus is well positioned because they know everything that needs to happen to help him see how to go forward. And this needs to be a transparent conversation with the American people so they can see that you can't talk out of both sides of your mouth in this day of everything you say is made public. You got to stand someplace and you got to be consistent about where you stand. He hasn't been.
Well, I would say he's been consistent, but consistently in the wrong place, actually.
Good correction.
I want to play something, John, that Michael Eric Dyson said. He sort of compared Bundy to Ryan. Let's see if you think it's a fair comparison.
I don't see a great deal of difference between Paul Ryan's comments about lazy inner city people who really just don't want to work and this guy suggesting that they abort their babies and they somehow, instead of picking cotton in slavery, are being subsidized by the government. There is a continuum of racialized beliefs that has to at least acknowledge connection between on the one hand, the arguments about race that are implicit and the arguments on race on the other hand that are quite explicit.
Is that a fair comparison, you think, John?
It is a painful comparison. And I've known Paul Ryan for a very long time. Our dads went to law school together. And we come from the same part of this country. I think that Paul Ryan, I can say this without a doubt, Paul Ryan reveres Jack Kemp and wants to be Jack Kemp, or wants to be a Jack Kemp type figure. And what has happened for Paul Ryan is that the statement that he made, as well as one that's been less covered, part of his speech at CPAC, where he repeated a story about an impoverished young man that was just way off the mark, and he got called out on it. He has had some terribly embarrassing moments related to race and related to how he talks about race, or at least poverty in the broader sense. And so I would hope that he looks at this visit with the CBC as a huge opportunity to learn and to grow. And I will, in Paul Ryan's defense, I will say that I suspect he hopes that he can get there. But for Congresswoman Moore and others, the important thing is to make it a quantifiable progress as opposed to a rhetorical progress. And this is a big deal because right now, Paul Ryan, who I think really does like to think of himself as a new Jack Kemp, is being outstripped by Rand Paul and others who are going deeper into these discussions. And so let us hope that we have a race to see who can do the most, who can really move this thing forward, because the Republican Party, founded in opposition to ought to make this a central part of it. And if Paul Ryan is the thinker, the ideas man of the Republican Party, then he is being given a great opportunity by the CBC to say to Eric and to other folks, you know, boy, I don't want to be this guy.
Jim Perry, I want to follow up on that, and particularly about Rand Paul, because he, too, has been trying to make inroads on race and not always getting it right, actually.
Neither one of them are getting it right. I would argue this meeting itself, though, I think would be more productive if we focus less on the budget and the economy. Paul Ryan has very deep-set views on those issues. He's not going to become for Obamacare in this meeting, is my guess. What I think is useful is Rand Paul's ideas about felony disenfranchisement, letting people who had committed felonies vote again, letting people, talking about drug sentencing, how to change those things. Those are issues where Paul Ryan does not have very strongly declared views yet, and I think it would be useful for the caucus and he to maybe talk about that, and maybe if he and Rand Paul were on the same page and other Republicans on those issues, that might help sort of change that conversation on criminal justice issues. And that's a place where I think there's progress and there's possibility of compromise. I don't think there's much room on the fiscal issues for compromise.
All right, we have to leave it there. Congresswoman Gwen Moore, thank you so much, and we will look forward to see what happens in this meeting and what happens after.
Well, and thank you for having me, too. I think your panel is just spot on because right before this meeting with the CBC, Paul Ryan is having yet another hearing on poverty, and he's having two very distinguished black conservatives, Bob Woodward and Bishop Holloway there. So I hope that he really wants to converse with us and to not just CYA.
Right. I hope you're right about that.
Right.
All right. Thank you so much, Congresswoman.